There's a kind of blindness that has nothing to do with sight. It's the blindness of ignoring what's already speaking to you, of dismissing the signals because they don't arrive as certainty, of waiting for something louder, clearer, undeniable, while something subtle is already guiding you. Tonight's question is a little different. What wisdom from the stars do you trust? Join me now in and through the Static Seance.
Between stations, neither here nor gone. The hum of voices trapped in the wires, their confessions dissolving into static. A seance not in candlelit rooms, but on flickering screens, where the ghosts don't knock, but distort the signal. Shadows coil in the white noise. If only one dares to alter their own frequency and listen.
Stolas in the Ars Goetia is known as an astronomer, a teacher of the heavens, a revealer of hidden knowledge through the movement of celestial bodies. But symbolically, Stolas represents something deeper, the intelligence of pattern, the quiet order behind what looks like randomness, the voice that doesn't shout but repeats. And you may have doubted your intuition, not because it failed you, but because it didn't look the way you expected guidance to look. So in the past, what guidance saved you? Not what advice you were given, not what logic concluded. What guidance found you and stayed, even when you tried to ignore it? There's a difference. Some guidance is external, instruction, direction, explanation. But some guidance is internal and persistent. It shows up as coincidence that feels too precise, as a dream that lingers longer than it should, as a feeling you can't quite explain, but you can't dismiss, as a moment in nature that feels like a response instead of an observation. At first, it's easy to overlook because it doesn't demand belief. It invites attention. And if you're not used to listening, you probably will miss it. Or worse, you explain it away. That was my relationship with it for a long time. I received influence constantly. Synchronicities, visions, dreams, responses from nature during ritual practice. But I treated them like background noise. I took them for granted. I drowned them out. I ignored them, and not because they weren't meaningful, but because acknowledging them meant I would have to change how I understood reality. It's admitting that guidance doesn't always arrive through logic, that intelligence can feel instead of explain. And that was uncomfortable, so I resisted it. But the thing about this kind of guidance is that it doesn't disappear. It repeats, it circles back, presents itself again, and again, and again, until ignoring it becomes more difficult than acknowledging it. That repetition, that pattern, that's where Stolas operates, not in a single moment of revelation, but in the insistence of recurrence. Eventually something shifted internally. I stopped demanding that guidance prove itself, and instead I just started paying attention. And the moment I did that, everything changed. Because the moment I started embracing those signals, they started embracing me back. What once felt random became structured. What once felt subtle became clear. What once felt questionable became undeniable. Not through force, but through consistency. And the guidance became extraordinary. Not because it suddenly appeared, but because I stopped rejecting it. So in the present, what intuition leads you? Not what do you think, not what do you analyze. What do you feel before the thinking begins? There's a kind of knowing that doesn't explain itself. It doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It doesn't provide evidence. It simply aligns. You feel it when something is right, even when you don't know why. You feel it when something feels wrong, even though you can't justify it. You feel it when a path opens, not logically, but energetically. And the challenge is that it's quiet. Quieter than doubt, quieter than fear, quieter than overthinking. So if you're not intentional, you miss it. Or you override it. This is where most people disconnect. And not because they lack intuition, but because they don't trust what doesn't explain itself. They want clarity before movement. But Stolas teaches something different. Alignment precedes action. You don't move because you are certain. You move because something aligns and clarity follows. That's the inversion. And it requires trust. Not blind trust, but practiced trust. The kind you build by noticing patterns, by remembering what happens when you listen, and what happens when you don't. For me, that contrast became impossible to ignore. When I followed that subtle alignment, things unfolded with a kind of precision I couldn't have planned. When I ignored it, everything became heavier, slower, more resistant. Same world, same circumstances, different alignment. That's the present work. Not discovering intuition, but honoring it. So in the future, what cosmic pattern shapes you? Look at your life not as isolated events, but as cycles. Where do you repeat? Where do you return? Where do you fall out of alignment, but then find yourself back? There's a rhythm to that, a pattern, and within that pattern is your trajectory. Stolas does not teach you to escape cycles. He teaches you to recognize them. Because once you recognize them, then you can align with them. Instead of resisting downturns, you understand them. Instead of clinging to peaks, you appreciate them. Instead of fearing uncertainty, you observe it. And something shifts. You stop asking, why is this happening? And you start asking, where am I in the cycle? That question can change everything for you. Because now you're not reacting blindly. You're orienting yourself with a pattern. And that orientation is power. Destiny in this sense is not a fixed outcome. It's just a relationship to pattern. You are shaped by what you recognize and what you align with. And if you ignore those cycles, you'll feel chaotic. But if you observe them, you begin to move with them. And movement with pattern creates a kind of stability that isn't rigid. It's fluid. Insight replaces noise, not because the world becomes quieter, but because you learn what to listen to. There's still distraction, still doubt, still contradiction even, but it no longer leads you because you've identified something more consistent than noise. Pattern, repetition, alignment. The stars teach patience, not passive waiting, but trust in timing, because patterns don't rush. They unfold. When you try to force movement outside of alignment, you create friction. When you move within alignment, things open, not instantly, but correctly. That distinction matters because impatience often comes from misalignment, trying to act before something is settled into place. Stolas teaches you to wait, not idly, but attentively, to observe until the pattern becomes clear enough to move with. That's a different kind of patience. It's active, it's aware, it's engaged, and it builds precision because when you finally act, you're not guessing, you're responding. There's something else here. The heavens mirror the psyche, which means the patterns you observe externally exist internally. Your cycles of doubt and clarity, rhythms of expansion and contraction, your phases of connection and disconnection, they are not random. They are reflective. So when you learn to read one, you begin to understand the other. And that creates a kind of integration. You are no longer divided between the inner and the outer. You are observing one system expressed in different forms. And that realization can stabilize everything because it removes the sense of chaos. You are not lost. You are simply in a phase that you have not yet learned how to read. And once you learn it, you'll regain direction. That has been my experience. What once felt like a lot of noise revealed itself as pattern. What once felt like imagination revealed itself as communication. What once felt dismissible revealed itself as essential, but only after I stopped rejecting it. That was the turning point. not receiving more guidance, but respecting what was already there. So now the question becomes yours. What wisdom from the stars do you trust? Not intellectually, practically. What signals have you been receiving that you keep minimizing? What patterns repeated that you keep dismissing? What intuitive pulls have you felt that you keep overriding? Because that's where your work is. Not in finding something new, but in recognizing what has already been present. You don't need louder guidance. You need deeper attention. You don't need more signs. You need to stop ignoring the ones you've already been given. Stolas does not overwhelm you with revelation. He refines your perception. He teaches you to see what is already there, to trust what repeats, to align before you act, and to understand that guidance is not absent. If you are willing to listen, truly listen, you may realize that the stars have been speaking to you for a long time. The only question is, will you trust what you hear?
Hold me under until I breathe, and slow my sink till I creep beneath. Where is now my soul to keep? In the sweet deep freeze of a cryo-sleep. She took the plastic out the door. She put her smile in a